In this video, I'm following up on my last two videos where I was talking about sowing seeds in June, July, some that will flower for this year and some that will flower for next year. And I'll link those videos below in the description. But what I wanted to do was show you a strategy for sowing and growing seeds at any time of year, really, and any type of seed, so that you've got like a consistent strategy when you come to sowing your seeds. You're not always having to start again and read the seed packet, etc. You'll just know what to do. So let's do that in this video. So let's go through and start sowing some seeds. And this is really a follow-up from my what to sow now. I've got two videos on how to sow seeds, which I will link in the description. Not how to sow seeds, but seeds that you can sow now for flowers next year, which will be cut flowers for next year. And also then I did a follow-up one, seeds you can sow now for more flowers this year. So obviously the ones for next year take a little bit longer to mature and they need to overwinter. So you can still sow those now, that's fine, and this video will help you with that. But the second video is to sow now for flowers this year. And the method I'm showing you is suitable for either or. It doesn't matter which crop you're sowing. It's suitable for flowers this year or for overwintering flowers that are going to grow next year. The only difference is some of the flowers that will flower this year can be sown direct into the ground, and I'll talk about that later in the video. Now let me just show you, this is another video I'm going to link below in the description. Is remember I did stop using your plastic plant pots and save money, and I fold up these foil trays, and I show you all that in the previous video. It's so cheap. It's a much cheaper way of sowing seeds. It's a much more efficient way of sowing seeds, and I just wanted to show you here. These I've already used for salad, harvested them. They've now expired, really. The salad went past its best. I use them for cut and come again, and so now of course I can reuse them. I mean, I showed you in the video how kind of sturdy they were, but I thought it was a really good time to show you that they're so sturdy that I'm in fact reusing them, and they, apart from having a bit of soil stain on there, they are literally as good as new. So my compost is basically sand. I do put builder's sand, sharp sand in amongst the compost, and I probably do, it depends on what you're growing, but I do probably nearly half and half, although slightly more compost probably. But the idea, if you're making your own compost, the idea is that the sand or whatever medium you're using is just to keep the soil open, because the roots obviously on new seeds are extremely fine and delicate, so they don't want to come across compact or impacted soil where it's just impossible, like a brick, and it's impossible for them to get their roots through. The other reason, of course, for the medium, whether it be soil or vermiculite, perlite, whatever you want to use, is to help with drainage, because the other thing the roots don't want to do is be waterlogged. And so that's what you're looking for. So when you're adding your medium and you're coming up with your own recipe, that's what you're looking for, an open soil that drains well. And of course you can test it. So I water my compost in these trays, and you can see how quickly the water drains away, and that's a really good sign that I've got it about right. You can also use the smaller takeaway trays, and you can use both the folded up larger tray and the smaller trays inside another foil tray, and use it as a kind of a bain-marie for bottom watering your seedlings. So I like to start with damp compost, and then you can just top up the bottom of the tray that the others are in, and it will sort of bottom water, and that way it causes minimal disturbance to the seeds as they are trying to germinate and put down roots. All right, so there's your various setups, and of course if you want more information on how I put the holes in, how I fold the corners, and how I use these foil trays, which are much longer lasting than the plastic trays, much more sturdy, much more efficient. All right, so you've come up with your compost recipe, you've put it in your pot, whatever that may be. Doesn't have to be obviously these foil trays, it can just be plastic plant pots. And then you water it, so that you want your seeds to be watered. Sorry, you want the compost watered before you sow your seeds, because it's just going to be much better than trying to sow water afterwards, and your seeds will just fly all over the place and you won't know where you've put them. So start off with watered compost that's evenly watered right the way through before you even think about sowing your seeds. When you're choosing your seeds, you need to choose seeds that are going to flower before the first frosts or that are going to overwinter. So the overwintering flowers will be the hardy annuals and hardy perennials, and those will overwinter and you won't expect flowers till next year. The annuals will need to be sown now, and you're going to have to check how long they take to flower because you need to know you have enough time for them to flower before the first frosts. And a classic example for me is to do sunflowers, marigolds, calendula. I am going to try and fit in some snapdragons, but I am aware that I have a slightly longer season than some of you. So you'll need to work that out for yourself, depending on your zone. And on the subject of snapdragons, this is a classic example where it does really depend on your zone because snapdragons will actually overwinter. They're often treated as an annual because they won't survive past sort of -5 degrees C. And I'll put what that is up in America because you have your Fahrenheit. I'll put that up on the screen. I don't know offhand. But so we had a fairly mild winter this year, so all my snapdragons overwintered, but that's not guaranteed every year. But you can see what I mean about you're going to have to kind of figure out what works in your particular zone. And then really there's two different types of seeds that you're going to sow. There's those that require a little bit of darkness to germinate and those that will prefer to be germinated on the surface. And you really don't need to overthink it. Usually the size of the seed is the depth of the sowing. So for instance, if you have a sunflower seed, you'll probably want to put, a few millimeters of compost just over the top to settle them into the soil. And the finer the seeds, so seeds like foxgloves and just trying to think, fox snapdragons, things like that, they're so fine that you can just sow those direct on the surface. And then if you mist them in or just rub them in, I like to rub them in with my finger, and that gets them into contact because what they need to do is be in contact with the soil and the moisture as opposed to be buried by it, if that makes sense. So, and as you can see, I'm also using my finger to sort of spread them around so they don't all grow in one clump. But just make sure that they have some contact. So things that you can sow now, which I'm sowing here, you can see now, are the sunflowers, and calendula and marigolds are also good, and they're nice if you're celebrating that Mexican festival Day of the Dead because they will start coming up around those times. You can succession sow, and they're also just nice for autumn as you're heading towards that autumnal period and the light levels are low and you want those more cozy warm colours. Then obviously these sowings are really good for that. Now, you don't need to sow everything in trays. You can save your trays and your compost and sow direct into the ground. And as you can see, these calendula here were self-seeded. So I know this spot is really good for calendula. So I just chucked some more seeds. I have collected my own seeds from last year, so I can afford to be a little bit more cavalier when I'm casting my seeds about. They don't all need to come up, but they probably will. That's another video I've just done, is how to collect your seeds. Start thinking about that now. So obviously look at that video as well. And then, so what you need to do really is just plan how much time you've got left realistically before your first frosts, because that is different for everybody. And you need to work out if your plants are going to have enough time. And I do cover that in those seeds to sow now videos. But the only exception, of course, is the seeds that will overwinter. So the hardy annuals and the hardy perennials. And I think in the US you would class them as cool flowers. These are flowers such as columbine, forget-me-nots, some snapdragons. Depends on how cold you get. They can overwinter. For me, it's Canterbury bells, my white valerian, my foxgloves. All these things you can sow now. They will not flower this year, but what they will do is they will develop a good bulky root system, and they will put on a lot of leaf growth. So things like Honesty and Sweet Rocket, they will kind of actually be a little bit evergreen. They'll stay evergreen over the winter so that you'll know they're okay. And then come the spring, they just have a huge advantage because they've already got an established root system and established leaves. So the moment we start hitting those warmer temperatures, they will take off and they will be the earliest to flower as well. And my Canterbury bells, which I started around this time last year, they are still flowering now. So they kind of all bulked up at different rates. So the vast majority of them have flowered in June, end of May, June, but I still have more that were delayed for whatever reason, and they are now coming through in July. So it is a really good idea to sow some flowers that you know aren't going to really take off till next year. And those ones that I've mentioned are good for that. And, see the video below. But really now we're just doing, so really what you're doing now is just sowing for now, for seeds that are going to flower this year, and sowing vegetables too. You can still do courgettes, for instance, now. Carrots you can still do. But then we're also sowing seeds. We're mindful of sowing seeds that will grow and flower next year. So you can kind of compartmentalize that in your head. You can obviously also even now sow cut and come again lettuce. That's what I do in these trays a lot. In fact, I'm going to be putting up a shelf in my greenhouse where I'm just going to put all cut and come again salads and herbs and everything in there. And it doesn't need to be in a greenhouse, by the way, but it's just that it's going to be the shelving isn't the most attractive thing, so I don't want it in the garden. It's going to go in the greenhouse out the way. And that's really it. And then you bottom water, you either self-seed straight into the garden. You can do that with sunflowers. I haven't done that with sunflowers simply because of the slug problem that I've had this year. They took out all my first sunflowers. So I'm going to bring mine on in the greenhouse just because it's a hostile environment to slugs in there at this time of year because it's so warm and dry. I know that they're going to be okay in there while they start. And they will then obviously be flowering at various rates until the end of the season, really. What else have I got? The Coreopsis. I've got all these different sunflowers. I've planted some more zinnias, so I've got a succession of zinnias. And I had some cosmos and some marigolds because my early marigolds didn't make it, or I sowed the wrong ones. They were too small. So, and this is just how I'm going to do it. And as I say, split it up in your mind into what's flowering for next year, put those to one side, in a place where you're not expecting too much of them this year. And then you can sow your other ones for this year separately, put them in a separate part of the garden. You will need to obviously water them and keep your eye on them because seeds don't want to dry out. They're going to struggle if they dry out. And then by the end of this year, if you watch both of those videos and have a look at your seed stock, see what you can reasonably sow and grow between now and your first frost, then you can have this beautiful cut flower arrangement yourself. It's really not difficult. And the added advantage, which I mentioned in my previous video, is if you can get those to flower this year, you will always also be able to collect the seeds this year, which means you're just going to have even more flowers to play with next year. So I hope that helps you to be able to sow almost any seed and have beautiful cut flowers this year, but also next year. And any questions, of course, ask me in the comments below. And if you found the video helpful, don't forget to subscribe, share with other like-minded people, and yeah, like also. And I'll see you again in my next video. Thank you for watching. Bye. Just before you click off this video, don't forget to visit my website at www.jillbretherton.com, where I have some great merch, which is garden related, so t-shirts, homewares, etc. If you click on the product or the flag of your country, it will take you straight to Amazon. So you will be purchasing off the Amazon platform, which means that you get all the same customer service and great protections that you would get from buying on Amazon. You can also see that you can get them in men's, women's and kids colours, sizes and shapes. So lots and lots to choose from there. You also see my blog on there where I'm updating everything as fast as I can. There will be recipes coming soon and just more lifestyle blogs on there also. Some really nice homewares available here. These are only available in the US, unfortunately, at the moment. But please, when you visit the website, don't forget to subscribe and join the mailing list so that you know when I'm updating it and I've got new products or a new blog out there on the website. All right, that's it. Thanks again for watching. Bye.